Hello and welcome to Spokane County Spotlight. I'm Commissioner Al French, and my guest today is Jim Frank, founder of Greenstone Homes. Jim, welcome to the program.
Mr. French, thank you very much.
You bet. Today I'd like to explore Latah Hangman neighborhood and some of the needs and challenges of this growing community. To begin, can you give us, our audience, a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your familiarity with that Latah Valley corridor?
Our company, Greenstone Corporation, has been a home builder and a land developer in Spokane for almost 40 years now. And so we've done development activity in Spokane County and the city of Spokane and North Idaho. And we've had a project for many years in the Grandview neighborhood, which is above Latah Valley. And I'm aware of the shortages of infrastructure that exist in some portions of our city, that making it difficult to develop the housing and the range of housing and affordable housing that we need in the community. And it takes a large amount of infrastructure, sewer, water, road infrastructure, to be able to support an effective growing neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And Latah is an area that has suffered from a lack of planning and a lack of infrastructure. And it's inside the urban growth boundary, so there's an obligation to provide infrastructure in that neighborhood. And so we have some challenges there in terms of how do we finance and how do we develop that needed infrastructure.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity. This corridor has been in the city for many decades, but beyond that, it was one of the primary corridors identified in the comprehensive land use plan adopted back in 2001. And there was back then a series of capital infrastructure projects that were defined to try and support that growth, and they haven't happened over the years. And so now we're in a situation to where it's the lack of capital infrastructures, streets and fire stations, things like that, are actually standing in the way of additional development and additional growth to accommodate the growing needs of a city like the city of Spokane. And from my standpoint, I'm engaged in this conversation because the Latah Valley corridor is in my county commissioner district. And in addition to that, in the spirit of full disclosure, I live in Eagle Ridge. So I encounter these challenges every day. So really appreciate the opportunity to work together to try and find a solution for this area. So as we know, the Washington State Legislature has recognized the benefit from investing in public infrastructure, which promotes economic development and economic growth in a region. In this regard, they have legislatively approved 3 financing tools to assist in paying for public improvements. Spokane County has used these tools in the past in Liberty Lake and Kendall Yards, both of which are projects of Jim Frank. And so, Jim, again, thanks for being here, but can you kind of give us a little bit more background, a little bit about how these tools work and how they've worked for you at Liberty Lake and Kendall Yards, and you've created outstanding projects and stuff. So we know as a county that the tool works. We used it in the West Plains, and you can see the result of the investments we made up there. So it's a very good tool, but can you give us a little bit more background about how it works?
Yeah, there's a variety of tools. Some of the financing for infrastructure development comes from development fees. So we pay sewer and water connection fees, and we pay traffic mitigation fees. That's part of it. But the other part of it is that the infrastructure, a lot of it is existing deficiencies, which can't be paid for with development fees. And a lot of it is major infrastructure that benefits the entire community and larger regions. And so you have to find a way of financing that. And so the legislature's allowed the formation of what's called a tax increment financing district. And the tax increment financing district allows a portion of the new incremental property tax that would be created by new development to go into a special fund to finance infrastructure. And that portion of the property tax only comes from new development, and it allows a reimbursement to the developers that are putting in the infrastructure, or it allows a reimbursement to the county or the city if they put in the infrastructure. So it provides a mechanism to incentivize private investment in a neighborhood, and it provides a mechanism to accumulate dollars over time that can be used to finance that infrastructure. The infrastructure needs in Latah Valley with just roads and sewer and water are very significant. They're in the range of $250 million. And so over 20 years, a tax increment district in an area like that will generate about that much money to help finance that infrastructure. So the needs are matching up with the amount of funds that would be generated by the tax increment district. We've used these in Liberty Lake in the River District project, where there was a big deficit of infrastructure out there. It seems like Liberty Lake is a very fast-growing place now, but the reason that that's happening at Liberty Lake is because 15 years ago, the county formed a tax increment financing district there before the city of Liberty Lake was even formed.
Right.
And that's paid for the major water storage, sewer pump stations, major arterial construction, and even recently paid for the Kramer Bridge over I-90. Yeah. All of that was financed by a combination of developer mitigation fees, developer GFC charges, and the tax increment financing district all contributed to that solution. Same thing happened in Kendall Yards. Kendall Yards was just a brownfield site, subject to a lot of cleanup needs. The city really wanted to see the Centennial Trail built there. That was about a $10 million project, but the city had no money to build the Centennial Trail. So the tax increment financing district provided the incentive for Greenstone and the city to work together, construct the Centennial Trail, and of course we all can see what a fantastic benefit that's been to the city and how much growth it's stimulated. So the same opportunity exists in Latah Valley, and these tools are very effective, and the experience that we've had with them across the region has been very effective.
Yeah, the success of Kendall Yards cannot be overstated. It's a great neighborhood that blends the different infrastructure needs. To circle back, the TIF would be predicated on a building plan of 250 units per year for a duration of probably about 20 years for a planning horizon. That would be about a total of 5,000 units. How do you reach that goal? What's next in terms of being able to achieve this?
Well, I think that the private landowners and the private developers need to know that there's a mechanism for funding the infrastructure that's going to be necessary there. And you're asking people to invest in housing, and they need to know that that can be done economically. And so these tools are available, and there's been lots of conversations with people that live in the neighborhood, people that own property in the neighborhood, the building and development community, government officials, and everybody sees the value of working together, pulling on the oars in the same direction to accomplish the goals that the city has for housing needs in that area and providing the infrastructure that land developers need. Most of the burden on this will fall on land developers. They not only will be paying the fees, the development fees, but they will be financing the infrastructure. And when the new development comes and creates new property tax base, then they get reimbursed. So that's the beauty of this, is that it's not putting the burden on the municipalities. The burden is placed on the private developers. Now, there may be some really large projects, like the interchange between 195 and I-90. It's a $50 million project. The county, under those circumstances, as you know, could issue bonds to pay for some of it. But most of the infrastructure will be done by private development and in coordination with, of course, the city and the county, and creating the infrastructure needed to support that residential development. And also in the district here, we have to remember that there's about 3,000 jobs being created in the Hangman Valley, Grandview neighborhood, TIF boundary that's been proposed. So there's a lot of job formation, and we need houses that are located near where those jobs are being created. And we need to keep traffic. We need a system of transportation system that will keep traffic off of I-90 and off of 195. So you can't be using I-90 to go to the grocery store. Right. And that's a little bit of what's happening right now.
Well, and with the addition of housing that could serve, the burgeoning area of the West Plains. In the last 5 years, I think we've added over 6,000 new jobs on the West Plains, but we clearly haven't added 6,000 new homes to support that workforce. And so this starts to accomplish that in terms of providing housing to support those jobs that are already in place, in addition to the jobs that will be created by the development and stuff. And so it's, going back to Kendall Yards, I mean, it was not just a residential project. You have residences, you have commercial, you now have office. I mean, it truly is a mixed-use area, which, I think the comprehensive land use plan anticipates this kind of smart growth approach, if you will, to development. And the residents in that valley that have moved in, whether it's Eagle Ridge, Qualshan, or any of the other developments in there, they moved in with the expectation that the infrastructure would be provided. And unfortunately, it hasn't for, over 2 decades. And now it's reached a crisis point. People sit on 195 trying to get on I-90 because they've got to get through the metering, because they're, you've got to be able to provide a safe path to be able to get downtown. Well, as you mentioned, reconstruction of that interchange would make that transition much smoother, and have people spending more time with their families and less time in their car trying to get to and from work or other locations. So
yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with people in the neighborhoods, and the lack of infrastructure resulted in a building moratorium a couple of years ago. And a building moratorium is really just a reflection of the fact that we failed to provide the infrastructure that we needed. Right. And building moratoriums don't solve problems. They just delay the inevitable. And so the people that live in that neighborhood have legitimate concerns about the lack of infrastructure, and they're very interested in working together to try to find a solution. And so I do think that there's a winning combination here of people that live in the existing neighborhood, landowners, cities, and the county staff that want to provide a mechanism of accommodating the growth that's happening in that area. And we need to, as you've talked about, we need to have smart growth. We need to recognize that land uses need to be integrated more closely together. And neighborhoods need to be more walkable. Neighborhoods need to have access to arterial systems that don't force them onto interstates. And so the kind of planning that would happen through this process is going to result, I think, in a better kind of neighborhood, that our comp plan is really envisioning, and that is more mixed-use development and more finely integrated uses as we develop our communities.
Well, and as you look at the desires for the different stakeholders at the table, the neighborhood wants to see the infrastructure being built. The city would like to see the infrastructure being built, but it doesn't have the money to be able to do that. Developers would like to be able to develop that land and provide the needed housing. I mean, the state of Washington has said that the Spokane County is got 30,000 fewer homes than it should for the population we have. So where are you going to put those 30,000 homes? Well, obviously, all of that's not going to go in the Latah Valley, but you need the infrastructure to be able to support that and stuff. So it's a formula where everybody at the table gets what they want, and it's all winners across the table. And so that's the kind of solution that you'd hope that you'd be able to achieve. But, you know, one of the things that's happened in the last few years is an astonishing number of wildfires and wildfire events. And improving fire response and evacuation routes is the top priority for many communities, especially after the last year's devastating fires. So a new fire station's better with better access and current to current developments in the neighborhood is clearly a priority for not only the residents, but also the community at large. So that is contemplated as one of the infrastructure investments that would be provided through the TIF financing.
Yeah, the preliminary project list that's been developed recognizes all of that. The need to have, for example, multiple entrances and exits from a neighborhood, yep. So you're not bound by a single exit or entrance. And then also trying to provide even the importance of open space and green spaces that can provide buffer between wildland and urban areas. And so included in the development list of projects is about $20 million for open space preservation and parks and open space so that you can provide that kind of buffering between wildlife areas and the developed areas, in addition to fire stations and the other, you know, necessary infrastructure. So it's just planning. It's what we all call planning.
Right, yeah.
And the planning hasn't happened in the way that it should have. And I think this mechanism of tax increment financing allows that planning to take place, and then it creates the financing mechanism to implement it. And that's the beautiful part of it.
Well, and you mentioned something there about open space, and the county has invested millions of dollars into the Latah Valley area through conservation futures efforts. And so we have major portions of land in that area that are part of that nature preserve, that are part of that open space, so that you can walk the trails through the woods, and that the natural habitat has preservation aspects to it and stuff. So it's not that, you know, you're going to build every square foot in Latah Valley. That's obviously not going to happen. Even if you wanted to, you couldn't. But the county has already preserved open space in that area, so that we've got not only housing, but we've got quality of life to be able to maintain there. So I've also been working with the state to share our community's concerns with needed transportation infrastructure, making sure that we have a safe corridor for users, whether it's residents or freight and hauling, and visitors to the community is one of the major priorities as well. I mean, the 195 corridor is a designated T2 freight corridor that WashDOT is very invested into to try and make sure that they maintain the freight and commercial aspects of that corridor and don't allow it to be turned into a local collector street. And that's one of the tensions that exists between the city and the state, is how to meet both of those goals. From your experience, Jim, what is it that neighbors can do to provide constructive support for this effort? Is there a role for the neighborhoods in being able to come together to advocate for these essential services? Is it a matter of talking to their city council members, communicating with city staff, taking positions that says, hey, we want infrastructure and we're willing to partner with you to make this happen?
I mean, I think that obviously the first step is just education, getting the neighborhoods to understand what the tools are that are available and how the infrastructure needs in their neighborhood to be met. The second part of them is for them to be part of the process to really contribute to the project lists that are being developed, because a lot of the people that live in neighborhoods have a better idea sometimes of what the real needs are than some of the planning departments. They live with it every day. And so making sure that they're involved in that planning process, making sure that they're involved in identifying those projects, and then advocating, advocating for the change that's necessary to make sure that not only this planning is fully completed, but that it's implemented in a way that there's money available to implement it to reality. And so there's a role for them in that continuum of that process. And I think the neighborhoods being active participants in this is very important, and they'll play a very important role in it.
Well, and you know, one of the things that I've heard in those neighborhood meetings that I've attended over the last several years is, you know, how do we ensure that if there are funds raised, that they'll be spent in the corridor, and how can we assure that the projects that the funds will be spent on will be of a priority for the neighborhoods? And you spoke a little bit about, you know, with the development of the TIF, there is a project list that identifies all of the different projects that you can invest funds in, but you cannot take funds raised in that TIF boundary and spend it somewhere else in the city or somewhere else in the county. Those funds are isolated for just that neighborhood. So you've got a guaranteed source of revenue to meet a predefined list of projects that the neighborhoods play a role in helping to identify. So that representation for the neighborhood interest, as you said, they know a lot more about the neighborhood than a lot of us that are working to try and provide benefits for, so they need to be at the table.
That is the beauty of tax increment financing, is that the money has to stay in the district from which the money is being collected. So the money's being collected in a district that includes Latah Valley and Grandview, and the money has to be spent there. And that money is being generated by growth that's occurring in that neighborhood. So they, in essence, are self-funding themselves. And the money cannot go out of it. And that's been tremendously successful in other TIFs. And I just give you an example of West Central, where the West Central neighborhood is basically a low-income, poor neighborhood. They don't have a very strong voice, and so they would never get their fair share of infrastructure investment if it wasn't for the TIF formed there. Mm-hmm. They're getting money now from that boundary, and that's going to improvements in their neighborhood that honestly wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so that's the beauty of this, is that the money stays within the boundaries of the area where it is being created.
Yeah, so for the skeptics out there that say, well, growth should pay for itself. Well, that's exactly what this does. The incremental growth in revenue through the tax base is what pays for the infrastructure to be able to make sure that, you know, private development can happen and stuff. So, and as we know, city budgets have a lot of challenges, and challenges seem to increase daily. So being able to have a new source of revenue to be able to address these capital infrastructure needs not only meets a critical need for the city, but it also doesn't put any additional pressure on general fund that's looking to be able to provide other services to the community.
No, that's exactly right. And the money comes from the TIF district, and you're not calling on the general fund of the city to finance infrastructure. And the other important aspect of this is that it gives you money that you can now apply to the state or the federal government for matching money. And so a lot of the money that will be generated within the district can be used as seed money to get other funding from other sources at the state level and the federal level. And that actually happened in Liberty Lake with the Kramer Bridge. Half of that was paid for by the TIF fund, but half of it was paid for by the state of Washington. Right. And it's so much easier to go to the state and say, I have a project and would you help us fund it? And I've got half the money. Yeah. And if you go and say, I have a project and I want it funded and I don't have any money, begging never works. And so if you have some money, it just makes you so much more successful in your ability to get funding from the state and federal government.
Well, and WashDOT has been very open about, you know, if the city will come to the table with money, that they will be at the table too, because they see this as a state problem as well. and want to be a partner in finding a solution that will work for everybody here. So that's the other part of when coming back a little bit to the fire prevention. Right now in Latah Valley, they do have a fire station located at Eagle Ridge, but it's a very modest fire station. There is land that the city owns that could be converted or could be constructed a full blown fire station and replace the demand for fire station number 4, which is located downtown. What that will do is, as you increase your access to fire prevention and fire protection, that also has a role on the home insurance for those that are in that boundary. And so I know that one of the challenges for Eagle Ridge and Qualshan and those neighborhoods that are on the southern end of Latah Valley is fire insurance, because you've got either fire station 4 at the city or you got station number 3 down in Gibbs Road, and neither one of them are very close to that area and stuff. So even if you're not part of the TIF in terms of looking for new construction, but you're just in the boundary, you'll also receive other benefits associated with finally having infrastructure that has been long since missing. So that's another element of it. And the other part of it is that the capital facilities, we in the development industry know that capital facilities is sewer, water, streets, sidewalks, all of those things. There are all of those elements that are owned by the city or owned by the county. So those tax dollars that are coming from the TIF are buying assets that are going to be owned by the taxpayers. This is not, a gift, if you will, to developers. It's actually paying for infrastructure that the taxpayers will own and service those neighborhoods. So
yeah, TIF funds can only be used for public infrastructure that is owned by a municipality, and the municipality has to approve the project. So the project is initially approved by the city or county, constructed by the private developer, title of it's conveyed back to the city, and then the developer, it may take years, but eventually the developer gets some reimbursement for it. And so I'm
going to cut you off there because I think we're running out of time. And but I just want to say thank you to my guest, Mr. Jim Frank with Greenstone Development. And I'd like to remind our audience that this program and videos of all of our public meetings can be accessed on Spokane County homepage and our YouTube channel. I'd like to thank Jim Frank, our guest for today, and I'm County Commissioner Al French. Thank you for joining us on Spokane County Spotlight.